Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Atlanta Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Lee Cantor here with Stone Payton, another episode of ATDC Radio. And Stone, this is a very important one.
Hey, man, this is the one. This is where the rubber meets the road. Please join me in welcoming to the broadcast for this episode of ATDC Radio, Investor Relations Manager here at ATDC, Mr. Brad Schweizer. How are you, man?
I'm doing all right, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Well, Brad, this is a new role for you, right?
It is indeed.
And so tell us what the Investor Relations Manager does at ATDC. Have you figured it out yet?
I'm in process, but essentially I will work with startups that are part of the portfolio here at ATDC to help them raise money. That can come from a variety of sources, angel investors, traditional venture capital, corporate venture capital, and then there's some alternative financing mechanisms out there as well. I'll work with the companies to advise them on when to raise, how much to raise, what are the mechanics of that, what's a typical deal look like. I'll help them get ready to pitch. And then, I'll help them identify investors that would be interested in their type of organization. And then the other side of that coin is I work with a lot of the VCs and investment community to help them identify companies that might be a good fit for their particular fund.
So you're kind of matchmaker.
I'm a matchmaker, exactly.
Now, your background is pretty diverse, right? You have, education-wise, you came from legal, there's some accounting, business, kind of pretty eclectic background when it comes to business, right?
Yeah. So I have a JD MBA from Emory University. I practiced venture capital law for a while, and then ended up leaving the firm to do my own startup. And we ended up selling the assets off last summer, and I spent some time working with the acquiring entity, and now I took this role at ATDC to take a step back and reacquaint myself with the startup community and help the companies here at ATDC.
Now, are you seeing a trend in that maybe people are going to VC funding a little later? Maybe they're trying to bootstrap a little longer, kind of build up more traction before they go, and then they have maybe a better position for themselves?
Yes, absolutely. That is certainly something that the companies are striving to do. They realize that if they take capital too early, they might only not give up a larger percentage of their company, but it just might not make sense as well. Sometimes it makes more sense to have some of that customer base and actual demonstration of traction. Additionally, I've noticed kind of a trend that investors are looking to write larger checks. Your traditional seed round has actually increased in size over the past couple years. So it's not particularly out on the West Coast. A seed round can be anywhere from $1 to $4 million, and we're starting to see a little bit of that take place here in the Southeast.
Now, what's the climate for venture capital here? Are you seeing more firms popping up? Are you seeing more venture capital, maybe angels kind of graduating to venture capital? Like, how are you seeing the community?
Sure. So the community is fantastic. There are definitely, a distinct group of angel investors. There's groups that will invest in pre-revenue companies. There's groups that, will take a chance with a company that's got maybe one or two customers. And then we've got some guys that will write, multi-million-dollar checks around here. With respect to your question about angels kind of graduating to the VC community, sometimes they will go on and join a fund or create their own, but a lot of times they will form kind of syndicates, angel syndicate networks or angel investor groups, where they will all gather together, have some good discussion, share deals around town. They typically get, they're interested in seeing the very, very new companies that maybe just started, just joined ATDC.
So then you're finding that the people tend to stay in a lane, like angels are kind of angels, VCs are more VCs, and then private equity firms are private equity firms. Yes.
I do see that, but at the same time, there definitely is kind of some commingling, if you will. The investors are looking to, how can I put this? They're looking to invest larger checks. A lot of times now, they're looking for a lot more traction. And so you will kind of see some overlap where a VC may make an early bet in what would typically be an angel type of investment. And you're looking, when these angels come together and form larger groups, they're starting to wrate larger checks that kind of start to get into the early stage VC market. So you do kind of see some overlap there, but there definitely is kind of a stratified organization to it.
Now, from the startup standpoint, what's the type of counsel you give them? Everybody has, I guess it's customized to the individual, but what's, like, if somebody is going after angel, like, what are some of the kind of do's and don'ts?
Sure. So absolutely, there's, it's unique to everyone's situation. I guess just for purposes of giving a general overview, let's just assume it's a typical SaaS-based company. No hardware or services components or anything like that. One of the things that I would say do is make sure you've got your story straight. Make sure that you understand the financial implications of what raising money is going to do, how that's going to impact your cap table, which is really important, especially as you get further along in your company and raise larger and larger rounds. Some of the other things would be making sure that you've got what you're going to use that money for. You really need to think through, okay, I'm going to spend X% on hiring developers. I'm going to spend X% on advertising, whatever it may be. Let's see. Some other do's and don'ts would be I wouldn't just start randomly calling angel investors, just to pitch them your idea. Certainly, now, that's not to say that reaching out kind of in a cold email doesn't work, because absolutely, sometimes it certainly does. But if you're going to do something like that, you need to have a prepared, one-page executive summary or some type of teaser slide deck that really conveys the problem, the solution, the product market fit, and if there's a market there.
And that's where an ATDC comes in, right? Where there's a lot of education for companies at all levels to kind of walk them through some of these with landmines that they don't make. Maybe they don't understand the etiquette or the way to do some of these basic things.
Right. Absolutely. That's where ATDC comes in. I can advise them on that fundraising part, but the rest of the organization is very good at helping the companies identify product market fit, or identify their go-to-market strategy, which are things that I also help with as well when I'm with these companies and advising them on how to raise money. But a lot of the other ATDC staff members, coaches, and EIRs here are really, really valuable when it comes to identifying how am I going to sell this bad boy. Mm-hmm.
So now, are there any kind of mistakes you see startups make when they go about this process of raising money that's like, oh, here we go again?
Yeah, one of them is trying to solve too many problems at once, right? You think you've developed this new technology that can serve so many different markets, and it can be used by so many different people and organizations, which is great. But in terms of raising money, you really want to go in with a clear strategy on what market you're going to try and provide a solution for first, because an investor would rather see somebody that's got a really focused strategy on how they're going to sell to a customer in a particular industry versus, oh, this could be applied to so many different industries. Everyone's going to give me money.
Right. So that if you, instead of saying, oh, we can sell to banking, finance, or real estate, this is a banking solution.
Yes.
And we have 3 banking clients.
Yes.
That's a better story.
That's a better story. And then, you certainly could say, and look, this can be applied
like on
in
our
a year.
roadmap.
Exactly.
Right.
A product roadmap would kind of demonstrate where those other markets can come into play.
But it's better to kind of focus like a laser beam in one area and kind of have proof that area is mineable.
That's the feedback that I've been receiving from a lot of the investors that I talk to, after they'll meet with a company. Now, that's not to say that a company isn't going to encounter a pivot. Maybe you laser focus in on a market and you pursue it for a few weeks or a few months, and all of a sudden after knocking on a few doors, you realize that, oh man, nobody's really buying it for this particular solution, and then maybe you pivot and try again.
So how do you help them get the pricing right? Because that's tricky too.
Pricing is right, and that's for some of our other lovely experts here at the ATDC. But there's entire methodologies to pricing, and it's different. Generally, I would say take a look at your competitors and think about how you want to position yourself as a company. Do you want to be seen as the high-cost premier solution, or are you trying to win on a low-cost, high-volume type business?
But again, it's one of those things, pick a lane, own the lane.
Right.
Get traction in that space. That's a better story for an investor.
Absolutely. If you can show that, all right, I'm going to sell at this particular price, and you demonstrate why, you've got rationale to back it up. That's really the most important thing in fundraising. Is a lot of this is all based on assumptions, right? So to the extent that you can at least verify that you have put some thought into this and that there's a rationale behind your decision making, that's really what they're looking for.
So now if there's a company here at ATDC and that comes in and meets with you, you want them to meet sooner before they've gone out and knocked on a bunch of doors, right? You want to get the story right, get the pitch right, so that you can help facilitate, you know what, maybe this firm's a better fit for this type of product. This one, maybe you should hold off on that until we get a little better in the pitch. Right.
Absolutely. So making sure that they're ready to pitch is key, and actually answering questions is one of the harder things that I've noticed.
So you have to teach them to answer questions without getting defensive or making the investor seem stupid.
Exactly. And so a lot of the times when I'm speaking with these companies, I'll basically say, hey, I'm going to grill you now. It's not. It's nothing personal. I just want to get you prepared for what an investor is going to do, right? And so I'll ask really tough questions, and I found that that's been valuable.
So what's a tough question?
Good question. Let's see. I mean, one of them would be really probing into the go-to-market strategy. So if let's say somebody wants to go after banking, right, to pull from our prior example, I would ask, okay, have you talked to anybody? What did they say? Who do you sell to? Who do you sell to within that organization? What are the interpersonal dynamics of that organization? Right? If you're selling to the chief product officer, do they have to get it approved by the CEO?
Right. How complex is this?
Exactly. What's the sales cycle?
Right. Now, and what if I gave you this kind of money? What are you going to do with it tomorrow?
Oh yeah, that's a tough one as well. A lot of times, you can generally say, okay, I'm going to put a quarter here to development. I'm going to put a third to hiring, whatever it may be.
You're not going to buy my Tesla. don't say that, right?
Yeah. Probably not. I don't know. Maybe there's some investors on the West Coast that would like that.
But that's some of the coaching that you're giving them, right? You're kind of putting them to the test, teaching them how to answer these questions in a manner that is going to give them the outcome they desire, which is getting the funding.
Absolutely. That's honestly one of the most important things, because anyone can kind of hone their own pitch, right? But are you able to answer questions on the fly? Not only does it demonstrate your knowledge and understanding of your business, but it also demonstrates are you the type of person that can quickly think on the fly and make decisions quickly, especially in a startup where you've got to be agile and you don't have the luxury to take 2 years to get it approved by 3 different committees.
Now, what about from the other side, for the startup, finding the right fit from an investor standpoint? Like, do these investors are they watching my back a little? Are they going to have connections that are going to help move the ball? Or is this just money that's going to come and I'm going to be able to use it as I need? I mean, that's a balance too, right? I might want to take less money from somebody who has a lot of connections rather than more money from somebody who doesn't, and I got to figure stuff out.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I would say that it's very important to be strategic in the selection of the investor that you go with. Obviously, sometimes you may only have 1 or 2 options, right? And you got to take what you can get. But to the extent that there are multiple options on the table, you would want to think through those type of questions, right? I mean, would you rather, if you had a business and one investor, had a ton of experience in that space and the other investor didn't, and they were both going to give you the same amount of money, all things being equal, you would go with the one that
had the connection.
Exactly. Now, that's not to say that sometimes you just need capital. Particularly when you get later down the road and you know what you're doing, you've demonstrated traction, and you just need gas for the car. Then okay, sure, maybe you just go to somebody and get some capital, and you don't really need much else from them.
So now, do you help the startup in terms of, is it better to get an investor or get a loan or, reposition to your friends and family again, and maybe you can go that route. Like, kind of, it isn't an all or nothing. It isn't just one size fits all, right? You got to really kind of understand what they can and can't do.
Absolutely. And one of the questions that I like to ask is, what does the founder want out of the business? And that will determine.
Like, how do you want the story to end?
Yeah. Do you want this to be a business that, you can pull in a couple $100K each year for the next 40 years? Or is this something you want to sell for, multi-million dollars in the next 5? That will kind of impact the capital that you'll take and the investors that will be interested in your company.
Mm-hmm. So now how do you help them walk through that? Because is that things that they think about, or their heads down in their kind of project?
That's a good question. The more experienced entrepreneurs will start to think about that, but everybody's got to start somewhere, and at that point, a lot of times they are focused on the actual product and whatnot. I would say that I always advise them to minimize the impact this will have on their cap table to as much extent as possible. So if that means that they can, go another 6 months, adopt another 3 or 4 customers and increase their valuation and, give up 20% as opposed to 25 or 30, then that's something that I would definitely advise them to do. And with respect to taking on loans, taking a traditional bank loan is challenging. They want to see assets and things like that. But there are some, I've seen this more and more actually over the past year or two, some more firms that are coming out and giving, venture-based loans that are based on revenue growth and things like that, which is a nice way if you are in the position where you basically just need gas for the car. You can allow them to, give you a loan, you can pay it back, and you grow just as big as you would have with an actual equity round, but you don't suffer the dilution therefrom.
So what's been your most rewarding part? I know you just started here. Have you talked to anybody yet? Or where are you at in your ATDC kind of term?
Yeah, so I'm still, I am relatively fresh. There's a lot of companies here in the ATDC portfolio, so it does take some time to get to know them all. But I also have had a lot of good meetings with some investors, particularly around Atlanta. I've got to know a lot of them pretty well, and basically I'm on the phone every day with at least one, oftentimes many more investors from out of town, telling them a little bit about ATDC, learning about them, and again, trying to play matchmaker like we talked about in the beginning. So
now what's the kind of the reputation of Atlanta and ATDC around the country? Are people paying attention to us? Are we, kind of best kept secret?
Yeah, good question. Especially over the past, handful of years, I've really noticed that investors are starting to take a deeper look at Atlanta. I mean, we've got a lot of great talent coming out of the universities here. The cost of living relative to Silicon Valley and the West Coast is cheaper.
And the East and the North.
And the Northeast, absolutely. So those are things that investors like to see. They can put in $1 million down here, and it can go a lot further.
More bang for their buck, right?
Exactly. So much so that a lot of firms are starting to kind of develop a group with, an informal group within themselves that specifically focuses on the Southeast, with Atlanta as a bit of the hub there.
Now, are you seeing any collaboration between other cities in the Southeast? Because it seems like every city's got some startup-y thing going on nowadays.
Yeah, that's a good question. There is some collaboration. Like, I've had a few phone calls with some other people that have similar roles to myself, at their respective organizations across the Southeast and the country, just to kind of bounce ideas off each other and find out what works and what doesn't. But at the same time, there hasn't been a really coordinated push, at least that I've seen, across some of these other similar type organizations to ATDC to work together and share deal flow or whatever it may be, which is something that I think would be valuable for everybody if we could get something like that moving.
Right. It shouldn't have to be kind of the zero-sum game where our win is their loss. I would think there would be an opportunity. I think part of our secret sauce is that we get along with a lot of people, and it's easier to have conversations, and people aren't super territorial and protective.
Yes, absolutely. That's something that I've definitely found out about Atlanta and the South in general, is that people are willing to share, and they're willing to help out. they're willing to work together to make things happen. And
so why not lean into that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I am starting to see that. You're starting to see more out of state venture funds come in and do lead around or follow in around with a local investor, which is always great.
So now, part of your story when you're talking to these people is having been there and done that, right?
Yeah.
So how hungry are these startups for that kind of story to hear it from the horse's mouth?
You know, they don't ask too much about my personal experience. You know, I made a lot of mistakes, so that's probably a good thing they don't ask.
Well, it's the good, the bad, the ugly, right? That's part of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is one of the things when they say something that I thought, or you know, I made the same mistake, I'll definitely let them know. And it's interesting bringing that up because part of what my job entails is almost a little bit of counseling in the sense that, hey, I know this is tough, or you didn't, you know, you're going to talk to 100 investors and 98 are going to say no, or you're struggling to get traction. I understand that, or maybe you've got issues with employees or whatever it may be. I can kind of be there to say, okay, well, I'm obviously not in your exact position, but I had something similar happen, and I can kind of relate to them and make them not feel as I don't. What's the word I'm looking for?
Well, where they feel like, you know, woe is me, or start feeling sorry for themselves, like I'm the only person on the planet that's ever gone through this specific thing. You know?
Exactly. I'd make a large effort to let them know that they're not alone, that the startup world is filled with very high highs and super low lows, and it can occur within a day apart.
Right, and it's one of those things where you may not have had the same exact thing happen to you, but what happened to you might have rhymed with what happened to them, right? It might be in the neighborhood.
Right, absolutely.
So now, what's next for you? You're just doing a tour of all the companies here, getting to know as many as possible, kind of plugging into the investor world, getting to know as many of them as possible, and just trying to find the right fits for people.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of talking with people,
right?
You know, learning what they like, what they don't like, where they see things going. The beauty of ATDC is I get to see so many cool companies. I get to stay on the
right. You just have to stand
edge.
In the lobby and just wait, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Somebody will come up and ask you what's going on and probably pitch you one of their ideas, or at least let you know, which is fantastic. I love learning about all that stuff. So really, what's next is just continuing to talk to people, go to as many things as I can. You know, talk to as many people that want to reach out to me and that I reach out to as well, and just hopefully not only help the ATDC companies find funding and the investors find good companies, but demonstrate that the South and Atlanta is a great place for people to invest and for companies to succeed.
Now, are you doing any talking, speaking at different organizations? Or are you getting out there in the community and letting people know what you're up to and what ATDC is up to?
Yeah, so no formal, speaking engagements or anything like that, but to the extent that I get invited to an event, I do my best to attend and network and chat with all the people there. I've coordinated a few events with some of the other investor groups around town and worked with them to, help not only promote their fund but just educate the community. I think that's pretty important, and that's, now that I say it, is really where a lot of my exposure comes from, is from kind of education type events, which are great. There's a plethora of them in Atlanta that I'd encourage anybody to attend.
And if somebody wanted to connect with you and get on your calendar, what's the best way to do that?
The best way would probably be to either connect with me on LinkedIn or to drop me an email at ATDC. You can typically find that by reaching out to somebody in the organization that you have and asking to put them in touch.
Right, atdc.org. I'm sure you're somewhere on there, right?
Somewhere on there, yeah.
Just search for Brad, the investment guy. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, man.
Hey, thank you guys. This is great. You're doing something good for the community. I appreciate it.
All right. This is Lee Cantor for Stone Payton. We'll see you all next time on ATDC Radio.